You've written a brilliant book about Margaret Thatcher, and to help people understand Thatcher, who were born maybe after Thatcher was about. I mean, like me, and I'm learning a lot. I've learned a lot from reading that. What is it? What is probably like the number one thing that you want people to take away from Thatcher, and how they might apply it to today?
Well, the reason for writing it, well, there are two reasons. I was approached by Swift Press. They were doing a series of books on prime ministers, and they said, would I like to do the one on Thatcher? And first of all, I was a bit sceptical, because I thought, well, Charles Moore has written the ultimate biography of Thatcher, 3 volumes, 3,000 pages. No one can beat that. And I wouldn't want to even try, because I know I couldn't. And they said, no, these are just to introduce prime ministers to new people. And coincidentally, and this is going to sound really wanky, but I'd just taken on a personal trainer because I'd had a few health problems. And
well, that doesn't sound wanky with the bit at the end, the health problem. If that just sounds sad. I'm sorry, it's not wanky.
And he, at that point, was 25. And when he found out what I did for a living, he said, now, Margaret Thatcher, I've heard of her, but who was she? What did she do? I was thinking, oh my God. And he's an intelligent guy. So I thought, I'm going to write this book for him. And that's what I've done. So it's meant to introduce her to people who weren't old enough to vote for her, weren't adults during her premiership, and predominantly for people who were born after 1990. And the other reason for doing it is I didn't want to write a hagiography. And I mean, I'd be interested in your view as to whether you think I have, because you are one of the few people that have read it so far. And I have covered her failures as well as successes. But I wanted to explode some of the myths that have grown up about her, almost all put about by the left, who, again, never made any attempt to understand her. But the fact that a lot of what she did has not been reversed, and the trade union reforms, none of them have been reversed. You look at a lot of her economic policies, privatisation, which nowadays people think of privatisation as a thoroughly bad thing because of water and electricity and all the rest of it. But it was one of our main exports in the 1990s. We exported it all around the world. And there was no reason that some of the industries should have failed. They were just privatised in the wrong way. So I've taken that on. There was a myth that she was somehow in favour of apartheid and propped up the South African regime. Totally the opposite is true, as Nelson Mandela himself acknowledged. But I mean, everyone, if you go up to an average person in the street now and said, was Margaret Thatcher in favour of apartheid, you'd get about 80% saying yes, and the other 20% wouldn't know.
Yeah. Well, they all sung that Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead song when she died, didn't they? How absurd.
There's a hilarious anecdote about when Nelson Mandela visited her in Downing Street right at the end of her premiership. He was there for so long, and she had been told by Sir Robin Rennick, who had been our ambassador to South Africa, sort of Prime Minister, he's waited like 30 years to have this conversation with a British Prime Minister. So she said, so what you mean, Robin, is that I should shut up? He said, yes, Prime Minister. And for Margaret Thatcher to shut up for an hour was quite a feat. And it got to the point where the waiting press outside in Downing Street were chanting "Free Nelson Mandela."
I like that.
So there's lots of things like, I mean, the last chapter is just called 12 Myths, and I go through all of the things that I think she's been unfairly misinterpreted as. But it's only 45,000 words. They wanted 30,000. I said, that's a pamphlet, not a book.
It's a short book, though, which I like.
It is a short book.
Because if I get a big book, I go.
It's 170 pages, and you can probably read it in 2 or 3 hours. But it was a very difficult book to write, because you think, well, short book, that can't be that difficult. But how do you write about the Falklands War in 2,000 words? How do you decide what to leave out and what to put in? So it took me far longer to write than a much longer book would have done. But I really did enjoy it, though. And I've tried to, I think I write in the way that I speak probably a little bit too much. So it's quite a chatty book. It's not it's not meant to be an academic tone.
But that's my style as well for reading. I like to read. You know, I can't go. When I was 18, I'm sure like everyone, it's like, oh, I read all this Tolstoy or go to the modern classics.
No, I never did.
You know, I wanted to show off. I was watching like Nouvelle Vague French black and white cinema, which now I'd fall asleep after 3 minutes. I need just someone telling me what is Thatcher, and I've really appreciated that. Falklands. I used to live in Argentina, and obviously they're mental about it over there. And there's a day called Dia de las Malvinas, which is the Falklands Day, and I didn't know it was that day. And I used to go and play football 5-a-side, like a 15-minute walk from my flat, and I went out, and I never usually did this, but just by complete coincidence, I wore the full England strip. The full thing, head to toe, was all the England stuff. Walked down there, and I turned up, and I'm playing with all these Argies, and they said, Andrew, what have you done? And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, it's Falklands Day. And the panic. So I took it off and played with the shirt off, and then the way home, because they'd still recognise the shorts and everything, I had to sort of just run. I ran all the way home, hoping no one would see me, because they're so mad about that.